Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board of Supervisors met in closed session to discuss agenda items number 1 through 4. At this time, the board discussed only agenda item number 1. Agenda items number 2, 3, and 4 will be discussed this afternoon after the regular meeting. Agenda item number 1 was to confer with the county's labor negotiators. Those negotiators are Allison Hauk, Ray Espinoza, Joe Paul Gonzalez, Melinda Casillas, Georgia Cochran, and Steve Coffey. The employee organizations involved are excuse me, the Institutions Association, Law Enforcement Management, Management Employees Group, SEIU Local 521, the General Unit Employees, Deputy Sheriff's Association, SEIU United Long-Term Care Workers Local 6434, and the unrepresented employees, which include confidential management, and appointed department heads. The authority to meet can be found in California Government Code Section 54957.6, and at this time, the board took no reportable action. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. At this time, under item C, presentations and recognitions, we have nothing, so I'll move on to item D, which is our public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board on items of interest not appearing on the agenda. No action may be taken unless it is provided by Government Code Section 54954.2. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 items. The first one is for Dana Person, firefighters. That's a non-agenda item.
Okay. Yeah.
We've never done this before, so.
So you have 3 minutes.
Okay.
And here's your timer. And
Okay.
when that turns on, you have 30 seconds left.
Okay. Hi, my name's Dana Persine. I live in the county. I have an issue with the current fire situation. Hollister is approximately 1,500 square miles. We have currently 41 firefighters. At the end of September, we will have 29. 29 firefighters to cover 1,500 square miles is not enough. We train these firefighters. They are going to go, the ones that are being laid off are open season for other departments to pick up. The grand jury in 2010 reported that we have an insufficient amount of firefighters. It's 2016. We have that same amount currently. Is there going to be a Rosa Murata Fire Department at some point? We have 3 people usually staff a vehicle during a fire or an emergency. That's not enough. If we have multiple situations, what do? We're supposed to be servicing the community with our services. Comments like, if you live in the county, you can expect your home to burn down. That's an unfortunate comment. I live in the county. I have family that lives in the county. I don't want to hear that. I pay taxes. I want my home protected. Some of us in the county do have blue water, but currently that has been turned off. So the ones that do have the connections for fire protection, we have no water. So the connections don't do us any good. We have several new subdivisions here in the county and the city. Where is the money going? Are we collecting money for these homes? I sell real estate in this town, and I'm selling homes to people that have no fire service, basically. Because if we have multiple calls, there's nobody there to put out a fire or take an emergency. Also, the ISO, the insurance issues. I've had clients have their insurance terminated when they went for renewal because of the fire coverage. So this is a problem here in this county, and we need to have it fixed. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments.
Sue Becerra.
My name's Sue Bezzetto. My family and I have been residents of Hollister for the past 28 years. In that amount of time, we have seen our quiet country town that practically closed down on Sundays transform into a highly populated, ever-growing, busy little city, clamoring for a supportive infrastructure. Our town has become a desired bedroom community, quite obvious with the addition of several new subdivisions. With all of the changes and new growth within Hollister, not one thing has been done to accommodate the growing amount of commuters that exit and return each day. Highway 25 is still one of the main arteries in and out of Hollister. It has now become so congested that it's similar to driving in a funeral procession in and out each day. My question is, has anyone considered this? This should have been addressed prior to approving all the new homes. As a realtor, I'm concerned that this desired bedroom community is losing its desire. Because of the ridiculous traffic one has to endure, once again, my question is, why have we put the cart before the horse? Other communities build accommodating infrastructure prior to the influx of added population. Therefore, I respectfully ask, do you have a plan? And why wasn't it implemented prior to all these new subdivisions? It seems to me that police and fire protection, as well as traffic control, should have been remedial considerations and requirements for the city of Hollister. Thank you.
Yes, Dana Person.
Good morning, Marty Richmond from Hollister. I'd like to ask the board to put together an ad hoc committee and to go over and have some serious discussions with Gavilan Community College about putting together a 5-year plan for not only servicing San Benito County, the central part of San Benito County where most of the population is, but improving the service in San Benito County, which means offering more classes to people who are working for a living and have difficulty commuting to Gavilan. Now, if you're a full-time student and you're not, have to hold down a job, yeah, I think you can get on the bus and you can go to Gavilan, and you know, if it costs you anything, or maybe it's free, and sure, you can spend a lot of time there. But if you're like a lot of people that age or are having difficulties financially, they have to hold down a job, maybe full-time, maybe part-time, they need to have the education come to them. They cannot have the Gavilan Community College sit there and say, you have to come to us to get an education. Now, you know, I'm still never going to forgive them for walking away with $26 million of our funds and putting it where all the rich people are up in Silicon Valley. But that money's gone. We're not getting it back. I'm not an idiot, okay? And I know that money's been spent or obligated, and we're never getting it back. So the least they can do now that they have a new administration over there who says they're determined to do better for us is put together a plan to do better, rather than just sit around and say, oh, another year's gone by and nothing's happened. So I think you ought to put together an ad hoc committee, go over there to represent the county and say, we want to see a 5-year plan. I think that's reasonable on how you're going to improve the educational opportunities here in San Benito County at the level. More and more people are not going to be able to afford 4-year colleges. We know where those costs are going because we know where the university system and the state system costs are going. We all see it every day. So I encourage you to do that, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Comments, Marty? Any other speaker cards? No. Okay. Anyone else wishing to address the board on items not appearing on the agenda? Okay.
Chair, if I could, in light of the comments that were made, I talked to Dana at length regarding the concerns on our fire protection. I would like to recommend that we invite our fire chief to do another presentation. There was a grant that had been applied for. We don't know at this time what the status is, and it would be important for us to hear where that is. And I don't know if the fire committee, I know we can't go into discussion at this time, but maybe a report from the fire committee and the fire chief to give us potential,
You want to say?
for more positions, a plan perhaps. So if I
Yeah,
could,
I think we could. I think what we should do is allocate some time for our next agenda, which would be a
That
couple
would be
weeks from
good.
today.
Okay.
We can invite the fire chief, get an update from the fire, our representatives on the committee next time, if that's okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it was be part of my supervisor's report was to ask the board through the chair to agendize a fire discussion to talk about whether to authorize the committee to move in discussion only for a fire district and get the board support
Okay.
to have that at the.
So yeah, we'll put that on the agenda for next time.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. So moving on, we will move on to department head announcements. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there are a few announcements that we have. One is we actually did implement new traffic impact fees this year, so that there has been an increase to address traffic. We also have scheduled at our next board meeting Gavilan College. So Gavilan College will be here and give a presentation. So I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that, and as well as the public. We also have one at administration. Louis Valdez, our management analyst, has a couple items to report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. As the CAO has indicated, we have tentatively received word from the office of the Gavilan College president that she will be here at the board meeting on September 27th. So it's a tentative approval. They were not able to appear today. They had some accreditation staff visiting their campus, so she was unable to come today, but tentatively for the 27th, and we'll receive confirmation at the end of the week, we hope. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to make sure the board knew that at the last board meeting, you approved a contract with Gladwell Government Services. Diane Gladwell, the president of Gladwell, will be on site on October 17th, 18th, 26th, and November 1st to begin work on the Unified County Records Retention Schedule. So we will have all the departments meet with her individually, and she will prepare draft schedules for your review, and we will bring that to your board for approval later on this year. Third, we have on September 27th also scheduled an agenda item for Garden Mart. I've worked with the Sheriff's Office to come up with a proposed solution for that, so we hope to have some more information for you at that date. I have spoken with Ms. Houston, and she appears to be amenable to what we're proposing, so we'll have an item that comes out of the Sheriff's Office at that time. The last item I wanted to bring to the attention of the board, which is very important, particularly sensitive. We here at the county administration, as you well know, work very closely, or need to work very closely, I should say, with the Freelance, the newspaper here in San Benito County. As you all know, the Freelance is the only newspaper of general circulation for San Benito County. Staff has taken steps to research if there are adjoining counties or if there are any other newspapers in the county that are newspapers of general circulation. For those of you who do not understand or may not have knowledge of how that works, a newspaper of general circulation is found to be such by the filing of a petition with the Superior Court, and there are legal findings that need to be made in order to find that a newspaper is one of general circulation. The Freelance is the only one we have here. We have had some trouble in the last few weeks. There have been several public notices that have not been published in a timely manner. Number one, the tax collector did not have her public notice for delinquent taxes published in a timely manner, which is why if you click on the Freelance site, the first thing that comes up on the site is the delinquent tax notice, and everybody's been calling me and asking, hey, what's wrong with the Freelance? Well, it's the notice that they put up there, which I didn't know about until I actually saw it. I spoke to the treasurer, and she said that she had made an effort to post that in a timely manner, but we don't know if that effort meets the legal requirements that are established statutorily. That's number one. Number two, LAFCO had a public notice that also needed to be published, which did not get published. And as I think some of you who may be on the LAFCO board know, we were not able to proceed with the project, and we have to delay it by a month because the notice didn't get published. Third, we also had a couple of notices that were not published at the request of the planning department, so we weren't able to hold those public hearings. So those are all very unfortunate episodes, but it puts us in a particularly dicey situation because we don't have any other options. So we hope to bring an item to you on the 27th to discuss what options we may have to pursue legislatively to try and remedy that problem. But I wanted to make sure that the board knew that. We had made every effort to reach out to the freelance. We did not get any response back from them whatsoever. We did try and use some other means to make contact with them, but we were, for the most part, unsuccessful. We finally had the ads run late, but we simply cannot have that happening. So it's an issue that we need to ask, hopefully, the board to help us address in the future. Okay? Any questions?
Any questions, members of the board?
It will be agendized for the next board meeting?
We are hoping to have the item agendized for the 27th. It's not exactly clear what legal options we have. For example, if you have an ordinance, you can post it in 3 different locations and so forth. We don't have that legal option available. So we're going to work with the Office of County Counsel, hopefully, to come up with some kind of a proposed solution, which may require legislation to be presented in Sacramento to address it. As you well know, there is legislation in some areas, for example, consolidation of offices that applies specifically to a particular county. We're hoping to see if maybe that will be an option for us here, because there are other publications such as the Mission Village Voice and Benito Link that we could possibly use, but I think it's going to have to be some kind of a creative combination of a proposal to do that.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I guess other counties have a similar issue and problem. I can't imagine a lot of rural counties having, good newspapers available for these postings. It'd be interesting to know what they're doing about this issue.
Without running too far afoul of the Brown Act, we'll be happy to discuss that at length on the 27th, Mr. Botello, yes.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Thank you.
Thank you, Louis.
Valdez.
I don't think we have any other announcements.
Okay,
Thanks.
moving on to board announcements. To my left, Supervisor Barrios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to report out that the Community Corrections Partnership met yesterday morning, and we are moving forward with our community transition. I'm trying to think of the correct word. I'm going to look to our Community Transition Center. And this center is designed to help folks that have been incarcerated, when they do come out, that they get a warm hand, helping hand, to be able to direct them to college, to jobs, to training, to any service that San Benito County may offer. And it is it's been successful in other counties, and I think we're going to have we've got something in the horizon that is really going to serve us well. It's a vision that came out of the CCP, and I'm really proud of the work that has been done. The people that are part of the CCP is the police chief, our probation chief, our sheriff, our judge, our district attorney. So there's a lot of agencies from the county, such as behavioral health and Health and Human Services. So we've all put our heads together, and I want to thank Chief Baran for moving forward on that, and it's going to be a really good thing. The second thing is that San Benito High, I attended 2 open house and ribbon cuttings for San Benito High School and Chispa. San Benito High School now has a new state-of-the-art weight room that is really going to be wonderful for the students at San Benito High School and for the community at large. So those are open now. The Chispa has an office now in San Benito County, and it's really nice to have them as one of the community businesses that will serve in affordable housing for the county. And I want to thank Marcy Houston. She has been here before the board in the past complaining about what has happened at her business, and she is stepping up to the plate to find solutions for the problems that we're having. She has recommended through the Homeless Planning Committee that we start a garden. This would serve as therapy. It will serve as job training. So she's helping us to find solutions for our homeless community, and Jim is going to follow up on that with our homeless service center. So thank you, Jim, for that, and thank you for Marcy for trying to help the community at large. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Barrios. Supervisor De La Cruz.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
All right. Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to report that along with you, the Chair, will be attending the AMBAG, the Association of Monterey Bay Area Government meeting. And I just want to let the public know that AMBAG will be addressing Highway 25 from San Felipe Road to the county line and putting it back on the constraint list. We have been working with them through the San Benito Council of Government to get this done, and what that will do will help free up any funding that may come down the line from the state. Also, Supervisor Barrios and myself will be attending also tomorrow the Mobility Partnership meeting, which is discussing the realignment of 152 and possibly realigning it with Highway 25, which will provide funding for the improvement of Highway 25. Also, the San Benito County Council of Government is looking to put back before the voters of San Benito County a sales tax measure which will put money towards Highway 25. So, yes, we have plans. We are looking at it. We need the help of the voters. Also, I want to say that for 50 years, we had a contract with CAL FIRE that provided one engine and 2 firefighters to act as the San Benito County Fire. This has been, and will be continued to discuss in the fire committee meetings, and will be discussed. It was discussed at this last fire committee meeting a couple years ago. That contract went over to the city, and the county, through contractual arrangement, will continue to have its one engine and 2 firefighters in place. For the first time ever, the fire committee has been working to have a county fire station, and the site was chosen by this board to be Rosa Morada. This will be the first county fire station that we have ever had, and we're in a contractual arrangement with the city of Hollister to man that station. So I just want to report out on the things that we have been doing and will continue to do within the committees and subcommittees that we attend. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Supervisor Munzer. Supervisor Patello.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I think Supervisor Munzer has very eloquently stated some of the things that we have been working on. We have been planning parks and traffic circulation and the betterment of this community with the limited growth that we've seen up to this point. And, you know, fire is a big issue, and when we consolidated with, you know, Hollister and the city of San Juan Bautista to, create a joint effort, that was really the first step. It was never perceived to be a long-term solution for ongoing, contracts with the city of Hollister. We all recognized that the next step was to either create a joint powers authority or better a fire district. And we're at the point where we got to decide what we're to do as a community, and that will be, what we asked to have as a discussion at the next meeting, so we could take it back to a fire committee, and hopefully the 2 cities are do the same, and to develop a long-term plan going forward. Yes, I was the one that the speakers quoted as far as fire dangers out in the rural areas. We're not going to have a fire station on every corner in the rural out of the city areas. It's just impossible. But we can go a long ways in improving staffing and response, and that's always been the goal. And I think together, working with our partners, we'll accomplish that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Patello. The only announcement I have is to remind local residents of an event happening this weekend, Saturday, September 17th, in our downtown. It's the Downtown Beer and Bacon Crawl. You could get information on the event at the Hollister Downtown Association website. You can actually purchase tickets there. I would encourage everyone, if they're looking for a good time, to show up and get in our downtown. So just a reminder for everyone, there are actually some stuff to do here in San Benito County. So with that, we will move on to our consent agenda. Are there any items from members of the board that they wish to pull? No. Jaime, anything?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I was not going to pull it. In fact, I was going to talk to Ray about this in D1 on, number 12. I just have a quick question, and I apologize to Ray. I should have talked to you before. Sorry about that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we'll pull 12. Any other items? Supervisor Munzer? None? Okay. At this time, if there are any items that any member from the public wish to pull at this time? See none, I'll bring it back to the board for decision. Item 23.
Mr. Chair, I submitted an item for 31.
Was it 23 and 20?
Mr. Chairman, Pat Lowe, my apologies, I'm not clicking today.
That's fine.
Pat Lowe would like to speak on number 23. And Christina Chavez Wyatt would like to speak on number 31.
Okay, so what we'll do is I'll just pull those, and then we'll come back to them. So at this time, I'll accept a motion for the remainder of the consent with the exceptions of 12.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Betancourt, did you have an item? 25 and 26? Oh, he didn't put in the card. I'm sorry. Okay, so 25 and 26, Mr. Chairman, as
Okay.
well.
So at this time, I will accept a motion for the remainder of the consent with the exceptions of item 12, 23, 25, 26, and 31.
I will make a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So we will move to item 12. Supervisor De La Cruz.
I got the answer, Mr. Chair. I apologize. Got the answer.
Okay.
I just read it. I forgot to read one more paragraph. I make a motion to approve 12.
All right. Well, at this time, is there any member from the public that wish to comment on item 12? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. We have a motion.
To approve.
I'll second.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item 23 from the Human Resources Division. Not sure which staff member is going to take this, our CAO.
I'll take that after a comment
Okay.
from the public, yeah.
So we'll have the public comment for item 23 at this time. Ms. Lowe.
Good morning, Pat Lowe, Hollister, California. Before I make my comments, I want to make sure everybody understands I am not covered by the county's health care. This does not affect me. Okay, the only reason I've watched this issue is that I felt a responsibility to the retired county employees. People who have given years of service to the county with the promise of continuing benefits. Your item contains the same misleading information. The board and staff might have known for 18 months that you were talking about this, but the retirees had less than a week. The information also states that most of the people will be receiving a decrease in costs. Have you actually gotten the rates? When will the rates be made public? or is this the same? Trust us, we will be decreasing the rates, but you have no backup documentation. The real problem is simple. Some of the retirees believe this is the first step in cutting their benefits. If this is not the ultimate goal, please state that now. When most people retire, they don't make the decision lightly. They're very careful to decide if they can afford to retire. If you are going to change the amount you pay for health insurance, they need to know that today, not at some date in the future. I personally don't believe the priorities of this county have changed to the point that you would be approving out-of-state travel when you're cutting benefits to retirees. So please, have this on a future agenda. Let the retirees discuss their issues with you. Allow them to share their concerns. And I really want to thank you for doing that, because I know that you're going to do the right thing on this. And I know the people that have given service for 30-plus years are really concerned, and they just need to hear the board, the decision makers, say how they're going to proceed in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Supervisor Lowe. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Questions, comments, or approval?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'd like to add a few comments. There are a couple of handouts in the staff report. There was a letter that was sent out to all employees and retirees kind of defining kind of where we're at and what's going to happen. There was also an attached frequently asked questions for many. This week, retirees as well as employees will actually receive the rates. So the plan is to have them by this Friday. So those rates will be published, and it'll be published on our website. So feel free to look at our website, and that's on 2017 healthcare frequently asked questions, and as well as answering any other questions that the public or retirees or employees may have with regards to that. So yeah, that's really kind of the main thing. So there'll be another board meeting. It will be published, and we'll be discussing this in detail with the board. And there's definitely a lot of work moving forward. During this rate schedule, it'll also define informational days, what days they'll be for discussion for retirees. So there will be an all-day event for retirees. If they have any questions that pertain to them individually, they'll be able to have answers to those questions. The plan is to have most of this in October, beginning of October. So, but those dates will be published this week.
Okay. Any questions or comments from members of the board?
Just a comment. I appreciate that, Mr. Espinoza. It's important that we improve our, communication with our retirees on this issue. I think we kind of fell behind initially, but I think everybody here is trying to make a concerted effort to do improve. And the idea is to maintain benefits or enhance them, not find other ways to cut them, as we, unfortunately have in the past. But I think going forward, I think this is be a great opportunity for our employees and as well as our retirees. Thank you.
Thanks, Supervisor Patel. So at this time, there are no additional comments, questions from members of the board. I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Chair, if I may add one more thing too. If any employees or any retirees still have questions, now before they receive any information this week, feel free to call HR administration, and we'll sit down with you and try to answer those questions.
Thank you, Ray. So is there a motion for item 23?
Move to approve item 23.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item 25. This time we'll open up to public comment. I believe Mr. Bencourt had a question on item 25.
Richard Betancourt, 4140 Southside Road. I guess the point that I'm going to try and make on this particular item is I believe this is probably part of a CARB issue that to comply with the Air Board, you probably had to replace some of these besides maybe being wore out. That's my only comment on this particular item.
Okay. Any other, some comments from members of the public on this item? See none, I'll bring it back to the board for questions, comments, or approval.
Mr. Chair, I guess I would like to hear from our RMA director. I think the question was asked was this, were we purchasing this because the equipment we've had was worn out, or was this part of the California Air Resource Board management mandate to replace older gasoline and diesel engines?
Yes, both, and I'm not sure if this particular mower that's being replaced or tractor cab is actually a diesel unit or not. You'll recall that we have had a number of older diesel engines that we've had to basically knock a hole in the block and take them offline permanently. But this is a mower unit, and it gets a lot of work. So it's undoubtedly a worn-out unit that's being replaced.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, comments? If
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, it goes down South County, and then by the time it comes to North County, it's not working.
all right, I'll certainly accept an approval or a motion.
Move to approve the item.
Second.
Motion second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item 26. Again, I'll open up for public comment. The question, I believe, was from Mr. Betancourt.
Thank you. There again, the same comment as earlier. Also, I go by the county yard almost daily, and you folks bought some equipment several years ago, the pothole, single man pothole, and I don't see them going out anymore, or very rarely. So I can understand needing a motor grader, but there again, it's a diesel unit too, and they probably have to improve it to Tie 4 in doing that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Betancourt.
Mr. Chairman, you'll recall, I think we informed the board that last week we had a surplus equipment auction. We sold a 1975 grader at that auction. This is a direct replacement for that equipment. So 75 to now is a fairly long life cycle for this equipment, and again, it gets a lot of work, mostly in South County.
You know, if I get
Just to preempt that question.
if a few of my roads were actually paved, we wouldn't need the grader as much.
Send me a couple dollars.
Okay, so at this time, are there any additional comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Additional comments, questions, approval?
Make a motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Is there a second? Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to our final item on consent, item 31. This is out of the Resource Management Agency. Open up to public comment. I believe the question was from Ms. Chavez-Wyatt.
Good morning, Supervisor Rivas, Chairman, and Board of Supervisors, staff. I'm Christina Chavez-Wyatt on behalf of the San Bernardino County Business Council. I'm here today to support staff in the county in their concerns for success and solvency, but also to express concerns from our members that this ordinance is in fact a disincentive for business investment in our community, given the timing and recommendation of collection of impact fees. Specifically for industrial, commercial, and office, already facing impact fee increases dramatically increase in minimum wage, and yesterday's signage of the ag overtime bill. Most agencies collect at grading permit, final map, and building permit stages as applicable. Some cities allow you to pay in advance for upcoming fee increases to avoid additional fees. The Business Council has also been active. We have an incentive task force meeting twice a month that we've met for the last 3 months to create incentive and attraction programs for recommendation and presentations to the cities and county, including some real-world test cases to help existing businesses that we have here in our county that have high-paying career jobs to grow and prosper in San Benito County. We request the opportunity to continue collaborating further with staff and under your leadership to leave some flexibility on the timing of collection. Our concerns are not as much for residential as much as for industrial and commercial and office, as we'd like to wish to continue working with you to ensure that all these fees are collected prior to occupancy. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Christina. Any other comments from members of the public? Item 31. Bring it back to the board. Questions, comments? Maybe Mr. Barnes, if you have any comments.
Mr. Chairman, Christina covered a lot of ground in that brief comment. First of all, this is only about the residential fees. The current ordinance allows the residential impact fees to be collected at the time of certificate of occupancy. Industrial, commercial, and other fees are collected at the time of the building permit. We've had, frankly, an administrative nightmare trying to account for the residential fees being collected at the time of occupancy, and have been lax in actually collecting those in some cases, as I reported to the board, I think 2 weeks ago. We look forward to continuing to work on an incentive program. We look forward to working with the Business Council and Christina in particular on this issue. But the ordinance is an attempt to do some housekeeping cleanup and make our administration of this fee collection a lot smoother. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, members of the board?
No, just a comment that thank you for that, Brent. I know that we are not in the discussion of incentives for industry or business, but I know that that's coming. That's a goal of this board.
Absolutely.
And I do appreciate the direction that we're taking because we have lost a lot of money from uncollected impact fees as a result of not having an ordinance in place. So I will certainly support it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Uh-huh.
Britt, thank you. Is there any way that the board can get a report on the progress of those uncollected fees?
Of course. The data sheet that I held up last time and talked about but didn't quote from was actually a survey that was done in late June of this year. So it's 2.5 months old. Most of those fees, including one very large fee from an industrial project for almost $250,000, have been collected. I have not run an updated report. That's just anecdotal information. I would be happy to recreate that report and share it with the board.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments, members of the board? If not, I'll certainly accept a motion.
Move per staff recommendation.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, so moving on to our regular agenda, I'm going to go ahead and move item 34 to be heard first, which is out of our county counsel's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the public and the full board may know, the county counsel's office, together with the ad hoc committee appointed by the chair, has been working diligently on a proposed marijuana cultivation ordinance. This ordinance has been a rather complicated undertaking for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the uncertainty that the law in the state of California presents on this issue. The Assistant County Counsel, Barbara Thompson, together with the ad hoc committee, has been spearheading this drafting of the proposed ordinance. Unfortunately, Ms. Thompson is out sick today. However, the ad hoc committee can report on the activities that have taken place to date, and then the board as a whole can have a discussion as to what direction it would like to see staff in the ad hoc committee move in either finalizing the ordinance or moving towards some other type of solution, which includes perhaps a discussion on the merits of a moratorium on cultivation. So with that, I'll turn it over to the ad hoc committee, which is composed of Supervisor Botello and Supervisor Dela Cruz.
You sure? You want me to go first?
Absolutely.
Well, as Mr. Granger pointed out, we've been having a number of meetings with key county staff. We've had meetings with city officials on this issue, and it's a very complex and moving problem in the state as far as what's happened in November and different interpretations and lack of regulations from the state level and clearly at the county level, as we have seen a number of growing operations, cultivation operations pop up all over the county to a tremendous nuisance to people that happen to live around those the areas where people are cultivating commercially marijuana without permits. And it's two issues. One is the compassionate use of medical marijuana growing for personal use. That's one issue. The other issue is cultivation, commercial cultivation. And the committee has been trying to formulate conditions to allow that some sort of permitted use, but it's next to impossible without knowing what the state is doing. And the state has quite, a bit of work to do before they have their house in order. And so what the committee, through a lot of discussion, feels that at this point in time, in order to bring some order in San Bernardino County in regards to this issue, to put a moratorium on commercial cultivation of marijuana. And that's what we would like to bring to the full board for discussion and consideration to put in place for a period of time that could be determined by this board, and the consensus of the committee, which includes law enforcement, probation, sheriff, DA, the Ag Commissioner, public health, and behavioral health, would like to have more time to bring in responsible regulation to San Bernardino County, but it's take some time. That's what I have at the moment, and I'll answer questions later on. I think Supervisor De La Cruz has more to add.
De La Cruz.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I really want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for appointing Supervisor Patel and myself to the Medical Marijuana Committee. I honestly thought that we could make some progress in the interest of providing services in a safe environment for those who need medical marijuana, because I support it. I think it's important that medical marijuana is available to the members of our community in a safe and easy way, and at the same time allow the county of San Bernardino to develop a revolving ordinance that can change with time. And I envision working with my fellow Supervisor Patello on a compromise that even the rest of our staff can work together and say, okay, this is a workable tool that we can work on and test it and see where it goes. Through the process, through a lot of meetings with our sheriff, Candace, thank you, and our probation officer, thank you very much. They're all there. Even our Ag Commissioner was at our meeting too. Thank you very much. I just felt that there was really no progress, and And at times I felt frustrated, just couldn't get anything across. I work with my fellow supervisor, Patello, and very intelligent on the issue. Actually, very, very intelligent on the issue. Thank you. Because the more research I did, the more research he did, and that was good. I just felt that we couldn't do anything. One, there's a lot of girls out there right now that we have no local control. In fact, we heard the conversation that we should wait for the state to occur. I'm of the opinion that San Benito County is smaller than the state of California. Therefore, the wheels of San Benito County will actually speed up faster than the wheels of the state of California. I cannot wait for the state of California to dictate to us what we're going to do locally. And to the point where I said, okay, let's work on some compromise. What can we do for the meantime? Can we do something that addresses the need today? Can we ask our sheriff to go out in the community and arrest every single person that's growing marijuana? Can he do that? Do we have the resources to do that? I don't know the answer to that. Can we create an ordinance today in which it regulates a number of permits today for those who are growing, who are playing by the rules and are willing to move forward and say, I want to make sure I pay my dues. I want to make sure I am a productive member of society. I want to make sure I provide the medical marijuana to the community. We don't have an ordinance in place. We can't do it. We don't have a permit process in place. We can't do it. We need to develop some type of ordinance that allows for local control so we can handle this stuff that's going to get out of control pretty soon. And that's one thing Supervisor and myself both agree on 100% is we need to do something, otherwise it's going to grow out of control. And I don't want our sheriff, every single moment of his time and his department time, arresting people for marijuana. I don't want that, Sheriff. I don't want that. I want you, as you best know how to serve your department. So we want to provide those tools to our sheriff to make his job a lot easier when it comes to the definition of what is a medical marijuana and what is not. And we just can't come with a solution. So we asked the board, we're taking it back to you guys, help us how to best solve this issue. And that's where we are today. And we bounced about a moratorium. A moratorium will be accepted to me as long as there are milestones moving forward with the regulations and not waiting for the state of California to tell us what to do, but more do an ordinance that does local control, what's in the best interest of our community. And then also the other factor, too, is the city of Hollister is also moving forward with their concept. So how do we work together that's in the best interest of the community? And so we are here today, Mr. Chair, because we don't have answers, but we're asking for your guidance, the board's guidance on the issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and thank you for those comments. And, I appreciate all the time that has been dedicated by, our two members of the board, staff. I know Barbara, unfortunately, isn't here because she's sick. She's probably sick of dealing with this issue months and months. I know our sheriff. And this is a complicated, bizarre experiment in local government for us. And I say that because I've been teaching at Gavilan College. I teach an Intro to American Government class, and tonight our lecture, lo and behold, is federalism. It's a very complicated idea and concept for students to wrap, even myself, any of us, to wrap around. Our founding fathers created this system of government that is unique, where you have different levels of our government, which are sovereign, and and so you just ask yourself, hey, we have marijuana. It's a banned substance. It's a Schedule I banned substance, but yet it's legalized for the medical purposes. It's legalized in, 3 states now, Sheriff, for recreational use. It's on our ballot. It's Proposition 64 in California. Local governments and state governments have always been a great laboratory for policy experiments for our federal government. And so you have a really complex issues here and a whole bunch of different layers when it comes to marijuana. But what is unique about all this is in 2015 you have our legislature here in California that passed landmark legislation, 3 bills, AB 243, 266, and SB 643, which fueled the chaos, right? These 3 laws created a licensing and regulatory framework for medicinal cannabis. And so when I look at their website, they anticipate to have these regulations, to have this Bureau of Medical Marijuana. They anticipate it's going to be developed and rolled out January 1, 2018. That's a ways away. So I look at their website, and they basically say, hey, if you have any questions or concerns about growing, about cultivation, continue to work with your city and counties. And so then I look at their FAQ. Their FAQ basically says, question, if you want to apply for a medical a cannabis license issued by the Bureau, what should you do? You got to be patient. That's their answer. Be patient. The Bureau is still in the early stages of the development, and they won't be accepting any application for license until 2018. So the Bureau of Medical Cannabis, or the Bureau, it's under the direction of the Department of Consumer Affairs. They're holding a whole bunch of hearings on regulations. The nearest one, and it's happening now, the nearest one looks like it's going to be Monday, September 26th in Oakland, September 27th in Fresno, which I think that these are important for especially stakeholders that are interested in growing marijuana, for the medicinal purposes. It's important to be at these hearings. But in the conversations I've had with staff, in the research I've done, I think that, the most prudent action that we can take today is have a moratorium. Have a moratorium in place, because the issue that we have here is we have a whole bunch of illegal grows popping up. It's impacting our law enforcement officers. It's impacting our community, the impacts, to our environment and to the odor and the quality of life to a lot of these neighbors. But more importantly, I'm looking at the state for some leadership on this issue. I don't want to roll. I feel like we're just walking into this thing blind, and we definitely need some guidance. We need some, we need these regulations to be rolled out, to see what we're working with, especially from the state. Sure, local governments are creatures of the state, and in this instance, we need that leadership from the state of California. And so with that, are there any additional comments?
I have a lot of comments. Thank you very much. All of you know where I stand on this, and when Supervisor Botello and I had the charge of ad hoc committee, we brought back before this board a recommendation. I would like to bring that ordinance back for consideration. We are actually making it more difficult than it is, because this county has the ability that was given to us from the state of California to create our own policies. We don't have to wait to see what the state is going to do. We don't have to wait to see what the voters are going to do. We have the ability to create our own policies without waiting to see what the state is going to do. And I think that's what we should have done a long time ago. Then we could have simplified it. We wouldn't be in this dilemma right now. It'd be behind us, and we would have been in control. Unfortunately, as much as we say, why do we listen to the state of California? Why do we wait? We don't have to wait. They let us take charge. And as long as we don't violate their laws, which I don't believe the ordinance that we brought before you was violating any, no matter what happens in November, we need to consider it again. Because San Benito County, and let me show you something. I saw this ad in the paper, and this is before recreational marijuana is approved by the voters in November. This is geared to college kids for medical marijuana, mind you. Back to college special, 10% off with school ID. Free t-shirt or pre-roll for renewing patients. A little cartoon character with a marijuana leaf, sunglasses, a goatee. You tell me this is geared for medical marijuana? I'm sorry, it is not. We are going to be faced with this and a lot more if we as a county allow the cultivation of marijuana grows, legal grows in this county. We don't need to go there. We could actually simplify it for ourselves and bring back that original ordinance that allows only grows and a minimal amount of plants for people that need it for medical uses. We will be compassionate by doing that. We will be in control, and our sheriff, our public safety will have a lot less work to do. So that's my take on it, and I said it and I'll say it again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Barrios, for your comments. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was September 22nd, 2015, that this board, on a split vote, voted for voted for that ordinance and its first reading. At the second reading, it failed. And I think one of the big reasons that it failed on the second reading was because we were limiting the planting and growing of the marijuana indoors. I would propose we bring back the ordinance again, as Supervisor Barrios suggested, with the changes of keeping it at 12 plants, either indoor or outdoor growing. And it may need the subcommittee to look into this, but something along the line where no outdoor growing within 1,000 feet of a school, or whatever appropriate distance from a school would be, and an appropriate board fence if the outdoor grow is within 1,000 feet of a different residence. We have many residents that are, very far from their neighbors. So I don't think we need to require them to put up a fence just to grow their 12 plants outdoor. But if they're in a more residential type setting, have neighbors next door, then it needs to have an appropriate fencing. And I think the original ordinance did deal with the commercial growing, basically banning it at this time. And so I would support the original ordinance with those changes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Munzer.
Mr. Chair.
Yep. Supervisor De La Cruz?
The original ordinance does ban cultivation, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and I was against it. I felt that the cultivation, the commercial was the important part. And so now it's going in that direction to ban it, okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, comments at this time? Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Ms. Thompson is watching it on the computer or on CMAP, and she sounded good to me at 8:30 last night when we were talking about this, and I'm disappointed that she wasn't able to be here this morning. But, there's a tremendous concern that I have with some of these larger scale operations and the nuisance. I had 3 phone calls in 3 different areas about a week and a half ago of people complaining about these groves, or I guess they're called groves, marijuana plants. And when you get into a number of plants, there is a distinct odor, and that adds to the complexity of permitting any large scale operations. And I'm not sure if 12 plants in a backyard for individual users creates that same type of odor. If 12 plants is the right number, is that what the board would like to see? I know in our original ordinance that was allowed per person. Is that what we're stay with, or lower that number? I don't know if there's somebody from the staff level or the sheriff that knows how many plants creates a nuisance to the neighbor.
Well, Supervisor Patel, perhaps I could give just a little bit of background. Many counties that allow an exception for growing to comply with the Compassionate Use Act have selected 12 plants as the standard. And where that comes from, where that 12 plants comes from as opposed to 6 plants or 8 plants or 14 plants, was actually an opinion from the California State Attorney General's office. And they were asked to opine on the legality of growing as a cooperative or a cultivation, or what would be acceptable under the Compassionate Use Act for growing medical marijuana purposes. And how they came up with it, I don't know, but they pulled out the number that they pulled out and put in the Attorney General's opinion was 12 plants. So County Council, Board of Supervisors, Sheriff's Departments, as they've drafted these various ordinances, they've looked back to that Attorney General's opinion and said, well, you know, if we adopt 12 plants, at least we can say that's what the Attorney General recommended was the maximum amount that plants that could be grown. So at least there's some authority there for how we pick the 12 plants. So that's where the 12 comes from.
Okay, and a follow-up question. If it becomes a nuisance, we could bring it back to the board and make an alteration to that number?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that about covers it. Maybe that's what we should do, is just bring back the ordinance at the next meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Del Cruz?
Thank you. I know that there are members of the. Well, we already have grows out there. I mean, that's pretty correct, Sheriff. Right? There's already grows or operations out there. If you were to, I don't want to put you on the spot, Sheriff. That's the thing. If we were to go out there and say we do a moratorium, we do a different direction, and the sheriff goes out and picks up, say, 100 plants or 200 plants, how can he define what is a medical marijuana and what is not? In other words, when he goes in there, when he picks up all these trees, would it hold in court? Can Candace prosecute?
So,
and I kind of believe that no, the answer will probably no, or maybe yes, but it'll be hard. So why don't we create some type of ordinance right now to have them comply with our regulation in terms of the medical marijuana aspect, instead of banning it completely and having the sheriff spend all his time chasing all these operations?
yeah.
Why is it that we have to put a ban on everything?
So one of the problems has been in enforcing the Compassionate Use Act is exactly what Supervisor De La Cruz put his finger on. The Compassionate Use Act, as you might remember, allows medicinal marijuana to be grown as a cooperative or a collective. What constitutes a cooperative or collective is very vague under the law. The idea was that this cooperative or collective was only supposed to grow a finite amount of marijuana sufficient to provide for medicinal purposes. So it wasn't supposed to have one plant over what the medicinal purposes were. Obviously, that law has probably been disregarded in the majority more than it's been complied with. It was, you know, and so where you have somebody growing 100 or 200, 300, 400 plants or whatever, clearly that probably exceeds any type of medicinal growing that is required. Nonetheless, there are people out there that have tried to work within the definitions of the cooperative and collective and stick to those rules. So you might remember, and this gets lost in the discussion very easily, it's not that the state of California has said that the growing or the use of marijuana is legal. What the Compassionate Use Act says is that if you qualify as a patient and you have a doctor's prescription, you can use marijuana and be exempt from criminal prosecution. So again, people just kind of just blow right through that or just gloss right over that and say it's legal to smoke dope in California. It's not. It's that if you have a prescription and you're a qualified patient, you have an immunity from criminal prosecution. Having said that, and I don't, Candace is here so she can speak for herself, I do know as a fact from discussions with Candace and other DAs that given the current tenor of the society and its view towards marijuana, it's very, very difficult to pursue criminal cases against some of these growers or users and prevail in court with them. So, Sheriff, you might want to add any comments?
Mr. Chair, before the Sheriff speaks, and I really want to hear from him, is that I'd rather have an ordinance in place and go after those that don't comply with the ordinance up to the point where we can charge them $1,000, $10,000 for not complying. I think that's a more productive way than banning it completely.
It's good morning. I'll make an effort to answer your question, Supervisor De La Cruz. As I understand it, your question is, are we able, the men and women of my office, are we able to arrive at a grow and make a determination whether or not it is within the regulations that are in existence today for medical marijuana? Is that the question?
Yes, sir.
And so my answer is that it is very difficult for my staff to make that determination. The ambiguity surrounding the Compassionate Use Act has made it very difficult on law enforcement and on prosecutors to make those absolute determinations and to prove those absolute determinations in front of juries. The State Sheriff's Office has, a State Sheriff's Association rather, has communicated those concerns to Lori Ajax, who's the new director of Governor Brown's regulatory oversight board. And she is aware of those and is hoping to provide some clarity by January of 18. So, Supervisor Rivas, you're exactly correct in your recommendation that we be patient. Those determinations about the legality of medical marijuana and grows will be much easier after the state rules out their regulatory infrastructure in 2018.
Any questions for the sheriff? Thank you, Sheriff. Supervisor Munson.
Sheriff, I guess my quick question is, if we adopt an ordinance that allowed 12 plants to be grown, either indoor or outdoor, does that give you the ability to act on anything over the limit of 12 plants?
That would certainly be very advantageous to us. I don't know that it would solve every problem created in a community regarding marijuana, but that would certainly provide some direction to our staff and make an immediate impact on this community.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for the
I'd
question.
like to address your question, then I'll go back to the other question. But I also believe you have to have not only the plant limit, but how many patients can the care provider be supplying for? Because if it's 12 plants, but you're providing for 100 patients, that number has just greatly increased. So I believe there also has to be something in the number of people that are being serviced by the provider.
If I recall
Make sense?
from the ordinance, and I don't have it in front of me, I read it last night, I had it in my email. It's 12 plants is the limit per parcel.
Okay.
So
I
you
couldn't
could serve
recall what was
100
in there.
patients, but it's only 12 plants.
The other question was, how does the current state of affairs affect prosecution? I just want to give you one example. A few weeks, maybe months ago, I believe it was only a few weeks, there was an investigation going on in a grow on Fairview. Product had been put into a vehicle, the vehicle left, the vehicle was stopped. There was over 10 pounds of product, there were 3 individuals in the vehicle, and there was over $10,000 in the vehicle. One of the parties was from Alameda County, Oakland. The other 2 parties were from Florida. They were all related. So when the case hits my office and we're examining it, defense counsel comes forward and says, I'm representing these people and it's medical marijuana. I have all the patients that this marijuana is going to support. Of course, those papers haven't been provided as of yet. But the problem is, when those papers are provided, one, how do we verify that they're legitimate papers? And two, how do we verify that this grow is the only grow these papers are being used for? Or are there other grows that these papers are also being used for to show that it's medicinal marijuana? So there are major problems in these type of prosecutions. That's all I'll say for now. Thank you.
Candace?
Yes.
So how many plants did you say were in the vehicle?
Commander,
Or-
Commander, do you remember how many were there plants, or was it actually 10 pounds of product? 10 pounds of product already processed.
Oh, it's already, okay, I'm sorry. I
That's
didn't
right.
realize it was already processed.
And how many plants would 10 pounds relate to, would you say? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. It probably depends on the size and all that, so, yeah.
It could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 5
If it's a
Okay,
real
so-
healthy
so-
plant.
So if it falls within the sheriff and you're at the process point already, we don't know how many plants.
Correct.
Okay, so, okay.
Because
all right,
you can imagine, it depends on the maturity of the plant, how
Sure,
healthy the plant is, all of that.
yeah, okay. So saying that, they had X amount of pounds, then it was obviously grown by more than 12 plants. You couldn't make that determination legally.
Anybody from the law enforcement want to comment?
It depends on how good the growers are.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Depends
Well,
on
then-
how
then
much
that-
insecticide and pesticide and rat poison that was going into the water system was used to
Once-
grow this
Once, yeah,
healthy
okay.
plant.
So if it was seeds that the already processed, then this ordinance probably wouldn't play into it too well.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Would like to make a comment on the prospect of 12 plants. A competent grower can get 2 pounds out of a plant, so that's about 24 pounds of marijuana at about $2,000 a pound of street value. So we're really giving our people an opportunity to turn a profit of about $48,000 by growing their own marijuana. And I would hope that instead of becoming their side business that they do out of their home, that it would be used for their own use. I think 24 pounds marijuana exceeds what any patient could consume annually or maybe in a decade. So certainly feel that that is overly generous if you're talking about somebody growing what they need to care for their own bodies.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Mr. Chair, I want to point something out
Senator
that
Bias.
at one of the CSEC conferences that I attended, right now, before marijuana is legal for recreational use, there is enough marijuana being grown in the state of California to provide, I want to say it was 150 pounds. It was an enormous amount for every man, woman, and child in the state of California, and that's right now. So, I mean, I think that there's plenty out there for anybody that needs it for medical use already. And we can, by the way, for the ordinance that we bring forth, hopefully, we can reduce the number of plants. 12 was the number that we chose, but really we have the opportunity to put any amount in there that we'd like. And I want to remind us that when we prepared that ordinance, it was with the input of public safety. So we didn't do it alone as an ad hoc committee. We did get input from Committee of Public Safety.
And that's why I brought the number of plants up as an issue right now, is that 12 is a lot of plants. 5 is a lot of plants, and you have room for error with half as many plants. But back then, when we worked on this ordinance with law enforcement and staff, we decided to err on the cautious side and that's how the 12 was derived. But if it's be different, now's a good time to state that, then the committee will go back and make the changes and present it next week. I certainly, as one supervisor, would like to have something done at our next board meeting.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Supervisor De La Cruz.
I'd like to make a comment, but I'll wait for the comment after. Thank you, Kenneth. I do appreciate it. I'd like to call another member of the audience. Sean, I'd like to actually ask you some questions. You wanna
Actually, I think what we should do is probably open up for public comment.
I have a question of him. I don't want to hear his input. I have a question for him. Mr. Chair.
I don't know. I mean, it kind of breaks protocol because he's not listed on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest opening up for public comment and allow.
Yeah, and then you address this question during public comment. So at this time, open up to public comment. Hey, Marty, is it okay if he goes before you?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, we do. No, good. That's good.
Okay.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to jump the queue, I suppose. I had my own comments, but I also have a plethora of information that can keep me above or beyond the 3 minute. So would we like to go with the question first or my comments first?
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that you give your 3 minutes and
Gotcha.
I'll have a question.
Okay, thanks. I'm very happy to be here again and see progress moving forward. I am also scrambling throughout the state. We're during the open comment period for the California Department of Food and Agriculture Medical Cannabis Cultivation Program. Public comment closes on September 30th. Actually, the regulatory rulemaking process is substantially underway. In addition to the Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation, the Office of Medical Cannabis Supervision under the Department of Public Health are all in the process of rulemaking and scoping session meetings throughout the state. California Department of Food and Ag is also in the process of making these meetings throughout the state. They're working on their environmental impact report, their draft EIR that will provide guidance to many other people. They're also working on their economic impact report. One of the things that I was listening to, I was a little bit curious. We're waiting for the state to take action. Actually, we're not really waiting. When I was obviously in the Capitol during the formation of the MMRSA and then tracked it turning into the MCRSA with Senate Bill 837, the governor budget trailer language, we're supposed to still be using the collective and cooperative model. We're not necessarily waiting for action from the state. They intended a long transitory moment during this time period where the collective and cooperative model still should govern the activities of mutually producing medicine in partnership with caregivers and licensed collectives where they exist. There hasn't been a lot of work to license at the local level or to provide clarification to localities because previously we were operating under the closed circuit model of the Attorney General guidelines. Those are gone. We're moving forward with license types. A lot of localities are obviously moving forward with such license types. There's been probably a dozen or more localities just in the last couple of months that have sought to move forward. Many of those localities, obviously, I'll also point to, are no longer using a plant count-based metric. That was widely disregarded. I mean, as the detective discussed, yield can vary considerably. Those will be more water-intensive and more nutrient-intensive plants. If you want to say keep it to 12, that's going to be monster plants that are going to then produce far more. That's just the natural consequence of setting a plant count rather than a canopy size limitation. The other thing that I would point to is I heard a lot of questions about odor mitigation, a lot of questions about nuisance issues. Without regulating, of course, you're not going to be able to wrap your hands around this. Denying that these grows, that these cultivation sites occur in the county, I don't think is an effective public policy. The regulatory framework has been handed from the state well over a year ago, and it's time to implement. Sorry. So.
Sean, I got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Is there a difference in how many plants you grow in terms of the smell? Will one plant, 10 plants, will the smell be the same, or you got to reach a certain number of plants before your neighbors start noticing?
All kinds of variabilities. Obviously, setbacks are being looked at by many jurisdictions as odor mitigation, but with a good wind, you could be set back a mile, and that doesn't help you at all. Obviously with indoor cultivation or with greenhouse cultivation, there's more possibility of odor mitigation. However, you know, the problem right now of odors that are nuisance to neighbors is that right now we're dealing with anecdotal information and we're dealing with episodic violations rather than any sort of clear-cut zoning and regulatory framework.
So by having no regulations, the illegal activity will still continue to occur.
Undoubtedly, while it's still not legal in any of the 50 states. Sure.
So it's better to
I
regulate
think that's
it.
probably been discussed at the CSAC and RCRC meetings, that while it's illegal anywhere, there will be an incentive to participate in the black market. And unless there's a clear pathway to licensure that's provided with appropriate track and trace protocols that are being developed by the BOE and CDFA, you're going to have a hard time figuring out what's what and where it came from.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Sean.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's you, Marty.
Marty Richard from Hollister. So my personal view is that I oppose any marijuana, and as long as it's on Schedule 1. We talk about federalism. That's my opinion. I'm glad that the county council pointed out that we didn't legalize marijuana. We just said we wouldn't prosecute people. There's an enormous difference. Okay, you may not think so because you may think it's jail or no jail, but there's an enormous difference between legalizing something and just saying we don't have the resources, so we choose not to prosecute people. And I'm very glad you brought it up. Thank you very much. My view is you're going to know a lot more after the canvass of the vote, because the truth of the matter is all this talk about regulation, blah, 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 it's all baloney. 99% of the marijuana being grown and moved is being used for recreational purposes, not for medical purposes. If it was really medicine, it would be dispensed by a pharmacy like all the other medicine. It would be checked for quality. It would be approved by the FDA. It would be all that. So it's none of that. In fact, Schedule 1 means there is no approved medical use for marijuana. That's what the definition of a Schedule 1 drug. Very dangerous, no approved medical use. I'm not smart enough to know if there's a medical use really works. I'm just telling you the National Institute of Health says there is none. The CDC says there is none. All the doctors they got working in Washington says there's none. And the people who support marijuana say, well, they all work for the drug companies, and maybe it's all true. I have no idea, okay? But I can tell you this, and I'm going to say it again, 99% of the marijuana being used and processed in the state of California is being used for recreational purposes. And the idea that if we just legalize it, it won't go to the kids is nonsense, because it's going to be taxed significantly, and people will be growing it to beat the tax, like they do with whiskey. Make whiskey to beat the tax. Happens all the time. So I think what you ought to do is just have a moratorium until after the election. After the election, you'll know what the people here locally think. And if there's enough people here locally who want to do it recreationally, obviously the threat is they can take that to the election, to a measure, and they'll win. So you know exactly where you're going to be, and you can move on from there. Right now, there is fake control. We have marijuana cards, not required to be registered. What are they worth? Just as the DA pointed out, you can have 50 names here and the same 50 names in Santa Cruz and the same 50 names in San Jose, and what is that worth? It's absolutely ridiculous that we're going to try and build a system around controls that do not exist. There are no controls. So you either decide you're going to accept all these illegal grows and let people do what the heck they want. They can grow marijuana today and they can build machine guns tomorrow, or you can say, let's stop until after the election. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Renee Hinkle.
Good morning. Renee Henkla, Probation Department. I also spent the last 8.5 years as your county drug and alcohol program manager, working in treatment and prevention of issues of drug and alcohol abuse. I'm coming to you today not only as a professional in this field, but also as a community member, a mother, someone that's seen professionally and personally the effects of alcohol and drug abuse. I've done a lot of research in this community in particular about marijuana. With alcohol, it's the #1 use among our youth in this county. And that's something we need to think about. It's already the top 2 drugs used in this county among our youth and within our adults in our treatment. In our outpatient treatment, it's affecting families already. How are they getting it in their hands? How are they accessing it? These are all things that you have to think about. And as a mother, I have to think about the environment which my son is being raised in. You know, what type of environment are we creating for our youth? And that's something we have to think about. Not just the number of plants, but what are we saying to the future leaders, to our grandchildren, their children? You have a lot on your shoulders right now. I don't envy you. I don't envy you in terms of the decisions you have to make. You know, there's a lot of arguments on both sides, and you have to hear all of it and make an informed decision. That's a lot of pressure, and I hope that you make an informed one. And, you know, if you don't know all the information, I encourage you to do a lot of research. I think I invited you to a talk last week that was held in Santa Clara County by Dr. Kevin Sabay. He wrote a great book, and I encourage you to read it. He talks a lot about policy making. He addresses both sides of the issue, and he has a lot of great research in here as well as solutions. So I would encourage you to read that. I was going to read some snippets of it, but you know, the most important part is really in terms of commercialization or cultivation, it really leads to more access, perception of harm goes down. There is a lot of research that perception of harm, when it goes down, increase use. You know, use goes up, and that's been proven with tobacco and alcohol and any other drug. So, you know, I just want a safe place to raise my kids. I don't want to have to go to a park or a beach or a concert and have to worry about marijuana smoke and have to explain that to my children. So those are just things. Thank you.
Steve Freed.
Good morning. Steve Reed, San Benito County Behavioral Health Substance Abuse. Although scientific evidence exists that some cannabis strains may be beneficial for specific medical disorders, Dr. Wilson Compton, Deputy Director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse and the lead author of an August 31st, 2016 study published by the journal Lancet Psychiatry, states research has increasingly linked marijuana use to mental impairment. Also, early heavy use by people with certain genes increases the risk of developing psychosis. This poses a risk for our youth because of an increasing body of empirical evidence demonstrating harmful effects of cannabis use during adolescence. By legalizing the cultivation of marijuana, we should anticipate increased youth availability of marijuana and aggressive marketing by cannabis companies that put our youth at risk. The current trend to increase the number of medical marijuana dispensaries and to legalize recreational use has brought attention to the risk of cannabis, particularly among the youth. Protecting our youth should be our critical goal for any marijuana legalization effort, as marijuana poses heightened risk to the young people of our community. It is my hopes and recommendations that the Board of Supervisors does not allow the commercialized cultivation of marijuana at this time until regulations can be put into place to protect our youth from the harmful effects of marijuana use. And I think if you start to look through recently the 2016 California Marijuana Initiative and Youth Lessons from Alcohol Policy, I think they're going to gear a lot of this towards the same laws that are used currently with alcohol, and I think the board is going to really have to take a look at that, because much of that policy is weak, and it still allows for the youth to have access. And so I just hope that you guys take the time to really research this and figure out what's going to be best for this community. Thank you.
Jack Kirk.
Hi, Board. I'm Jack Kirk, and I'm a local businessman. I own a real estate mortgage company, property in Hollister. I do live in District 1, and appreciate each of you and your time you've taken to do this. I represent the residents for drug-free San Bernardino County. We want to encourage you to do some type of ordinance. There's been questions about 12 plants, 6 plants. I think the state of California's minimum is 6 plants. And what you're seeing in the county here is card stacking. This is what we've talked to some of the growers and things, and we've been out. I've gone to some of the dispensaries up in San Jose. Actually had tours, and they stack the cards. So, and they're cards from out of the county, they're cards from out of the city, they're cards from so when the police officers come out, there's these multiple cards. It's hard to tell, how many they can have in this cooperative. So if you're going to do an ordinance, I'd encourage 6, no more than 6 plants, and that you have to break these cooperatives somehow, because that's what's happening. They're just stacking and they're growing multiple plants. All of a sudden you have 1,600 plants in these grows. Also, some of the plants are quite large, and so they have different yields. When we went up to Airfield, up in San Jose, that most of the plants are, their plants are, maybe 30 inches, 3 foot tall. They keep them very controlled, and they're working for certain yields off those plants. So, allowing even 6 plants, but they're full grown and they're 6, 7 feet tall, you're going to have a different yield. So you need to consider that also. We have a Facebook page, and we have over 14,000 people coming to us for information. There's 506 likes. So we're starting to represent a large group of our community. There's a lot of concerned citizens. It's not one group, not one church, not one political group or anything. There's people coming together to push for some type of regulation in our county, in our city. I really encourage, I can't remember which of the supervisors brought up that you would work together with the city. We're meeting as a group. We have a committee that we put together with the mayor. We're meeting regularly. If you have any input, be interesting. If I know because of Browns Act, y'all can't come, but perhaps one of the supervisors who are on the committee could come, and we could start the interface with the city, with the mayor. And because he's really researching, we've gone to grows with him, and he's trying to get his head around it also. I know it's a difficult task for you, and I appreciate each of your efforts. But one of the things questions I read to the city officials and insert the county, in this, but I said, is your approach to this ordinance that of an attitude of accommodation by the city council, this is them or the county, towards the marijuana industry through the current ordinance and proposed fee schedules, or is the desire of the city or county to protect the residents and businesses of Hollister from the potential adverse impacts on the health, safety, and welfare of the secondary effects associated with cultivation, manufacturing, and dispensing of the marijuana products within city limits? Simply, is your goal to accommodate the marijuana industry, or to take care of and protect the citizens that live here? And I think what I'm hearing here is that your desire is to protect the citizens, and I encourage that, and that some type of ordinance together. You're going to continue to have grows until the state licenses are issued. We went up. One of the ones we saw was Elemental, and
You can wrap up.
Okay, but anyway, Elemental. Once I asked them, are you going to grow inside of a building if you come to Hollister? They want 4 acres. They want scissor wire, fences, greenhouses, and they don't care about the smell. They want to grow to their edge of their property. This is a big outfit. They have health things, yoga, and everything else in their building. So to take care of people, it's kind of quite an operation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Stephanie Smith.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. And some of you may know me by my maiden name, so Anthony. I have lived next to a large grow operation for several years now. I'm on a 10-acre parcel, and I have a 31-acre right next to me. It's progressed from 100 plants to 300 plants to now what is 1,000-plus plant operation. Following the initial announcement last September that the ordinance that was going to ban outdoor growing, they tore down their operation. It was like, the clouds parted and the angels sang. We have experienced, I live in the country, and, one of the benefits of living in the country is to have that fresh air come in your windows at night and not having to use your air conditioning. I've had to use my air conditioning at night, and it's cost me a lot of money to do that because I can't open my windows. Within 30 seconds, the smell overtakes our house of this horrible skunk smell. These plants, and to speak to the question about the size of the plants, these plants outside are 12 feet high and 8 feet wide. That is not a plant. That is a tree. Okay, and so that is how outdoor plants can grow. I believe the state limit was 6 mature plants or 12 immature plants. 6 mature plants is plenty if you're growing in the shade in Santa Cruz or where there's it's a cloudy environment. Here in this beautiful county with these rich soils, these things turn into trees. So I would like to urge you to vote against any commercial cultivation or criminal card stacking, as it would be. Our neighbors have 1 residence. We have 2. They're tapping into our shallow domestic well. That's another thing. They should not be using a 60-foot domestic well for cultivation. Any kind of grows should be done using an irrigation well or recycled water, like at the Airfield Supply. They have a really nice setup where they have growing inside. They have recycled water. It's very environmentally friendly, and so we definitely would like to urge you to ban any outdoor growing for the fact that the smell does carry, even as the marijuana lobbyist Sean addressed, the smell can carry for miles. So 1,000 feet isn't far enough away if it's outside, okay? It's got to be inside. It's got to be filtered. Otherwise, we can't enjoy our property. Even the state ordinance does not give out cannabis the protection of the right to farm. It's not okay to have it be a nuisance, a smell nuisance to neighbors, but I have not been able to get any action to enforce or limit this, and we really need to empower law enforcement to take action against these nuisance neighbors. Further, restricted access. The nature of this business, it's happened all over Humboldt. It's happened to us. They restrict your access. They dissed away all but 1 car widths of our 30-foot road easement to our house. They told us we don't want people coming up and down this road. They've threatened to kick up dust in our face if we complain about it. These are not good neighbors, and we really would love your help in protecting our right to enjoy our property. We pay a lot of property taxes, at least someone's staff in this county, so we'd really like your help and look forward to seeing what you do.
Thanks for your comments.
John Starkweather.
A lot of the things I had to say have been said, but they're definitely, when you guys go to your regulations, need to make a regulation of no stacking the cards and making sure there is only 6 plants or whatever it's going to be. I'm a business owner. I forgot to go over that part. Been a business owner in this county since 1984. Moved my family here, raised 8 kids. I have 11 grandkids living in this county that I'm worried about. I'm definitely totally against any sort of drug cultivating or growing or marijuana, period. I have a brother that died due to starting with marijuana and having all kinds of drug problems and drug-related problems. I got a brother that lives on the hides from the sheriffs and anybody else that he can. It's hit my family hard. The other day I was buying a car out off of Magladry, and there was somebody out there that they're getting ready to grow a bunch. They're clearing up a field full of cars. Like I said, I purchased a car. I noticed that they had probably 30 to 60 plants and mentioned something. He said, well, I got a card, medicinal card, to grow these. And these plants are probably 5 foot high, really green. And from talking to him, he's not selling them to the local dispensary. He said something about the Mexican cartel is who he's selling it to because he gets more money. You know, and that's happening throughout our county. I worry about the legalization to where anybody, you know and I know, that I could go and make an excuse. I could get me a medical marijuana card this afternoon, and a 21-year-old or a 30-year-old or somebody that doesn't have a job, that isn't holding a job, is going to go down there buy, because there's not a quantity limit. He's going to buy a bag of weed, and he's going to take it home, pull off what he needs, and he's going to sell the stuff to his younger brother or to some other high school kid or a kid that's 20 that doesn't have a medicinal permit, and it's going to be sold to the kids. And that's how it works. I've watched it in my own personal family, and I've watched it in community. I've had over 90 employees at one time, and a lot of them have smoked the marijuana and that stuff. And it's a sickness, and I really hope you guys seriously think about it. Wait for the vote. Let's see what I think that in our community and in our county, I'll bet you that if it was voted in this county by itself, that marijuana would not be legalized for recreation. And I hope that you take a serious consideration of that. Thank you.
Steve Becerra.
Good morning. My name is Steve Becerra. I'm a San Benito County resident, and I just want to, and I've had the pleasure of being one of the people that is on this committee that's meeting with the mayor and talking about the ordinance that's going to, some ordinance is going to affect cultivation, manufacturing, and dispensing. So I want you to hear those three words, because you also will need to address that in whatever ordinance you finally submit. Not just cultivation, there's other aspects of this thing. And I've said many times publicly that I think it's really important that people who require medical marijuana have local access to their medicine somehow. I'm not sure how the city's going to accomplish that. It may be by opening a dispensary, it may be by delivery only, but it's something that I would think you should need to consider too, because I think it's important for all of us to be compassionate about people that need medicine. With that said, I've seen a lot of these operations just driving around town, you know, on the way to Four Corners. I've had the opportunity to see the operation that Mrs. Smith has next to her house. I happen to be a 20-year law enforcement vet. I retired from the city of Gilroy, and I worked narcotics for about 5 years, 5.5 years undercover with the task force in San Jose. So I have some background in those kind of elements. And I can tell you that the grow that's occurring next to Ms. Smith's house is not that much about medical marijuana compassionate use providing to people in San Benito County. Probably, I've smelled the smell. And the cars that I see tending, the car license plates that I've seen tending to those plants are from Colorado, they're from Idaho, they're from Oregon, from Texas. I mean, they're from everywhere. So a lot of this product, some of the product may be going to collectors, but a lot of this product is going somewhere else for larger amounts of money. Last week, when I was at the operation in San Jose, actually the largest dispensary in San Jose, freely they told us that they have, in a 95023 area code, there's about 500 active users that come up to buy their product. Recently, someone who supports marijuana use in one of our local papers said about 1,000. Yesterday, I talked to a marijuana grower, who estimated that probably about 1,500 people in this county, possibly. It's hard to say, you know, but so I'm going to use their numbers, not my numbers. I really don't know, but I have to. The manager of the dispensary told me 500, and so I have to believe him. Gentleman who mentioned publicly that he thought it was 1,000, I guess I had to believe him. And the grower yesterday, who said probably 1,500. That's not very many people, but I think you need to come up with some type of an ordinance to allow them their medicine locally, but also make sure that ordinance is a clear and smart ordinance for all the people in San Diego County, not just people who need medical marijuana, but for all the people. It has to be smart, and it has to be safe, and it has to be, but it has to withstand, legal consequences. So, please listen to what these people are saying, everyone, and make a great, informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg Harvey.
Thank you for your time. My name is Greg Harvey, and my wife and I own Joshua Inn Bed and Breakfast, and we're in a residential neighborhood, and we've had to deal with this issue firsthand with the house next door. So my biggest concerns, I don't see how I want to be compassionate. I definitely think people, if they need the medicine, they should have the care that they need. But where's the compassion? The compassion gets stopped right there. Where's the compassion about the folks that have to deal with the smell, the neighbors, the businesses? So I don't know how we can pass an ordinance that says that we can allow growing unless you can control the smell. And, if you had a 9-year-old that was in a room, like ours, forget business, if he was allergic to smoke, what would you do? Are you forced to close the windows, run the air conditioning? I mean, so that's one of my biggest concerns. The other concern I have is just what a lot of others is the legitimacy of the pot cards. We've got 4 boys that come to the house next door that say they have pot cards. And, the other day I go out in my backyard, there's the smell. Smells like skunk. I walk behind them as a good neighbor. I'm trying to do this without any police interaction and say, guys, can you please do me a favor? If it's for medical use, can you at least smoke it inside, or at least go on the other side of the house? We'll try. The legitimacy, it's just too loose and too easy for people to get these. So I want people to have the access to the medicine they need, but it is not compassionate at all towards neighbors to have to deal with it and to allow people to grow, I don't know, anywhere, but especially even in a residential neighborhood. I don't know how you can control the smell, a fence or whatever. So, those are my biggest concerns. Just as an aside, you may remember the incident, I think it was last week. We had SWAT surrounding our house. That was, that started with a guy that started with, quote, a pot card that one of the officers before that had told me that there was also meth involved, and on and on. So I don't know how much money we spent and how much resources we spent to get this one guy out of the house, but that's just an aside. My biggest concerns are about the smell, and it's just way too easy to get these, and so if you could help with that, that would be great.
I have a question real quick for the speaker. The smell of the person actually smoking it, or the smell that you're concerned is growing of the plant that's across the field?
It was being smoked, and so I just don't want any resident of any residential neighborhood to have to deal with any kind of smell, whether it's the growing or the actual smoking of it. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any other speaker cards? Anyone else from the public? Please fill a card and yes, please. You can fill a card after. You can.
I am Ann Ross. Showered and came down here while I watched you guys on TV. It was a long discussion, I know, but couldn't wait to get my 2 cents in. So, Ann Ross from Hollister. One of the things I noticed in summary, because I was more thinking about it at home, was it looks like to me that the government leadership's lost focus of what the leaders are trying to do. Initially, when we talked about marijuana, we were talking about beating the state in ordinances, beating the state so we could grandfather something, and bringing in business. So now that we've heard from so many people, and I was there for the initial discussions back in February, we were talking about the 12 plants initially, and everything was tabled, and I appreciate the fact that there's been a lot of research done in the meantime. But what's the goal? Was it business? Is it making our residents happy? If it's making our residents happy, which residents? The ease of obtaining it, which the kids call devil's lettuce, with or without a card, is a great concern. Are the card holders that have, the card holders that may or may not have to go out of town to get it? I'm not even sure if they do. Are they more important than the teenagers? Neurologist studies, and it was, as was reported today earlier, talk about teens' brain stems shrinking. The kids who are on ADHD medicine that smoke pot are fighting one drug against the next. They have to up it to Adderall. When that happens, Adderall's on the street. That's a fact. I talked to the neurologist myself. I have teen boys. We talk about the card holders that are trying to get it in town. I haven't heard any. I don't know if I missed it. We have people speaking for them, but have people come forward that have the cards that can't get weed, because I can tell them they can get it over the whale park near my house. I'm familiar with the two areas, or the areas that are presented, producing the smell, and next to Joshua Inn. Both of the neighbors are bullies. I know them personally and know of them because, again, I'm tracing back. I'm doing my own street research. They're bullies. They're not asked to please let it up. They don't say, yes, we'll tone it down. Yes, we understand. It's, I'll grow it where I want to grow it, and I'll put my guard dogs out there, and you can't stop me, ha, ha, ha. And the other one is, we got medical cards, ha, ha, ha. I don't know where they got them. I don't know them to be a teacher. One of them was a teacher. So I don't get that. What are we working so hard to irritate our law enforcement? They get up and they tell us what we need to do. For goodness sakes, the law is the law. It's not legal yet. Let's wait and see what the state has to say. Last thing is, where there's weed, there's meth. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Yeah, if you'd like to wish to speak.
Morning. My name is Peter Brazil. I'm an attorney at L&G. I'm going to reduce my comments to kind of a very narrow area, and that has to do with the concept of a moratorium that you're contemplating putting in place. We've done this in Monterey County already. San Luis Obispo County will be looking to do the same exact thing on the 20th of this month. In both instances, they incorporated an exemption for those who were legally operating that weren't in any other way violating zoning or building codes at this point. And that's my only issue that I want to address here. Everything else has been spoken about. I don't need to hit those points again. But I want to make sure that we allow for those that are already, at least in every other facet, legally operating, allow them to continue operating until you guys can iron out an ordinance to address this as a whole. I've already experienced this process going in Greenfield, City of Gonzales, Monterey County, City of Salinas, and this takes time. It's not going to be quick. And you already have people operating under the current law that we have in the state of California, which starts as far back as 1996, at which point we made the moral decision that this was a medicine and that we would allow an affirmative defense. 2003, we go further upon this as a state and decide to allow people to collectively grow. That being said, we've also spoken as a state that MRSA, which will come in full effect in 2018, will dissolve the whole idea of a collective. There won't be any more collective. It will be done for profit at that point. So the notion, I know there have been arguments about whether or not the amount of cards that are being utilized and whether or not this is a legitimate medical purpose. Well, the state of California has also spoken on that issue. Okay? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other speaker cards? Anyone else wishing to speak on the issue?
Hi, good morning. My name is Elia Salinas, and I'm a resident here in the area as well as a cannabis advocate. Medical marijuana has been legal for 20 years. Cannabis is an agricultural crop and is already legally being grown in our city and our county under the Medical Marijuana Act. Medical marijuana does not provide easy access to minors. That is a false scare tactic by opponents who have absolutely no idea of how the industry works. They do not know that the products are tested for pesticides, potency, and labeled accordingly. The first line of defense to protect your children starts at home with the parents. Teenage usage has actually declined in regulated states. I would prefer that you consider a moratorium so that you don't hastily put together an ordinance. And with that moratorium, I would, as Peter Brazil said, grandfather in the current farmers, some kind of registration process. I prefer that you not ban outdoor cultivation. I would definitely would like to make sure that there is no seizure of the current crops that are going on right now. It's going to be the harvest season, and that's our fear for a lot of the people that are legally growing medical marijuana, is that they do not want their products seized. If there was a kind of moratorium, how are they going to be protected? Would be able to protect the cultivators, want to participate and be the stakeholders, want to come forward and help with some type of an ordinance. If you guys were to at least put in a moratorium so that we can all come forward, we can all work together, we can both with the opponents and with the pro-medical marijuana industry, I think we can all work together and come up with something that everyone would be happy with. Thank you.
First, I would like you to look at a report that was published September 2016 by the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, www.rmhidta.org. Okay, so why do I say to look at this? Because we learn by other people's experiences. Colorado, let's look at what happened in Colorado. 2006 to 2008 was the medical marijuana pre-commercialization area. 2009 became the medical marijuana commercialization and expansion area, and then in 2013 they did recreational marijuana. Why is this report important? Because it deals with the legalization of marijuana? No. It also talks about that era from 2009 when medical marijuana commercialization was made legal. I'm sorry, I cannot agree with the last speaker who said that teen use is down. Look at this report. The stats are in the report. Regardless, I've presented some of my information to you already. Again, my concern, I've got threefold. One is, for my office, the prosecution, how it is very difficult to prosecute when you have the card stacking that was expressed. But you guys remember when I came to you back the beginning of the year to say, I need funding to go after the Marlowe parole hearing? Do you remember that? And do you remember why Marlowe was up for parole? Because the studies now are showing that the adolescent brain does not completely form until age 25. Remember that premise? That's why he was allowed this parole hearing, because they said his brain wasn't totally formed. Okay, remember all that? Okay, how does that apply here? The brain is not completely formed until age 25. By allowing cultivation, by allowing commercial cultivation, there's going to be more marijuana out in the streets. How are we going to protect our youth? According to the American College of Pediatricians, marijuana is addicting, has adverse effects upon the adolescent brain, is a risk for both cardiorespiratory disease and testicular cancer, is associated with both psychiatric illness and negative social outcomes. Evidence indicates limited legalization of marijuana has already raised rates of unintended marijuana exposure among young children and may increase adolescent youth. In fact, the stats that are in this study show you the impact on Colorado's youth, and it's applicable to California. Additionally, let's look at driving under the influence. For driving under the influence of alcohol, we have our per se 0.10%. They don't have that for marijuana. Some states are trying to develop a THC level. They don't have it. So prosecutions of driving under the influence of marijuana are going to be difficult. And again, the stats are in this report that show you the increase in driving under the influence of marijuana not since the legalization, but before that, since our legalization of marijuana, before that, the legalization of the commercial growth of it. The last area I'd like to touch upon, some facts I found very interesting, and Ms. Barrios, you talked about it a little bit. I gotta find it on my notes. Here, mind-blowing facts about marijuana production in America. And this is really about production in California. Trespass grows accounted for 72% of outdoor plants seized in California in 2013. Nearly half the cannabis eradicated by law enforcement nationwide was on public or tribal land. During California's growing season, outdoor grows consume roughly 60 million gallons of water a day, 50% more than is used by all the residents of San Francisco. An indoor grow module accommodating 4 plants sucks as much electricity as 29 refrigerators. In California, indoor marijuana grows account for about 9% of household electricity use. For every pound of pot grown indoors, 4,600 pounds of CO2 goes into the atmosphere. The production and distribution of pot in America emits as much carbon as 3 million cars. So not only do you have the impact on law enforcement, the impact on prosecution, the impact on our children, you have the impact on the environment. Again, I support the ban or the, whatever the word I'm looking for and can't think, moratorium. Thank you so much. I really support it, and thank you.
Thank you, Candace.
Any other speakers on this issue?
Hi, my name's Richard Gallardo. It's my first meeting that I've gone to. But I think I voted for the medical marijuana issue only because at the time my mother-in-law was dying of brain cancer, and I correlated that bill to her. And I think a lot of people are sympathetic to people who are sick and actually need this. On the other side, I'm also a retired sheriff's office in Santa Cruz County, and I did see quite a few young 18 to 21-year-olds carried medical marijuana cards. And I think it's a plague, quite frankly, in Santa Cruz County because a lot of people are walking around under the influence. And I think opening the county to commercial growth of marijuana kind of would give the impression to the kids that it's a benign drug, it's okay, and there's nothing to worry about. But I went online last night just confirming what I already knew, but I haven't looked into the marijuana issue in a long time. And it's not really such a benign drug. I think it needs to be seriously more scrutinized as far as the growth effect it has on the young adults, on their brains. There's some studies out there that shows that it contributes to psychosis. And so I think from the health aspect of it, it needs to be further confirmed, and whether or not it actually is a safe drug. You have to question why the FDA has not approved it, and yet people are using it, selling it, and authorizing its commercialism. But there are two sides, like I say, but I think it needs to be looked at very seriously from a social aspect and health aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any other speakers on this item?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Ted Moran, Chief Probation Officer, resident of Hollister. It's actually rare that I come speak before you on an issue that doesn't necessarily affect me directly as an department head. However, the probation department deals with the after effects of people going through the criminal justice system. For more than the past 20 years of my life, I've been working with this population, what I view as one of the most at-risk populations in any jurisdiction. And I can tell you that the use of marijuana is actually the #1 drug that we have when we do drug testing. It is one of the things that we worked with our offenders to break that type of addiction, to work them through into becoming productive members of society. It is a risky thing for them, and it's something that they have to work through themselves. I don't envy you in your position at this point because you are confronted with a monumentous decision that's going to affect the residents and citizens of San Benito County for a long time. I am personally in favor of, and professionally in favor actually, of a moratorium at the least, if not a ban, or some levels of control until we can find out where exactly the entire state is going. As was mentioned, we need to have local control over this product, over what's going on. And absent that, we're going to lose control and it will be hoisted upon us. So I don't envy your position, but I can give you some information about what I'm dealing with on that end over there, trying to make people better. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Any other comments on this item?
Thank you. Barbara Thompson and I had arranged for me to participate in the presentation of this item today, but obviously she's not with us. And I had prepared a speech for you to persuade you to put a moratorium or ban in place until such time that the state of California can roll out their regulatory infrastructure. Congratulations, it looks like you've arrived at that conclusion long before I had anything to say to you, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate the consideration that this board has had toward our law enforcement. Specifically like to thank the members of the marijuana subcommittee who considered our point of view in your research and evaluation. The only comment that I would like to make from my speech is that in March I went to Colorado for 3 days for a symposium called Colorado 2 years later, and it was basically a status check with the state of California, Colorado rather, into how things are progressing there. And one of the things that I learned from them, aside from their urging us to take control of our own destiny, which this board is doing, but also to remind us that marijuana has an appeal to a small number of people, but money has an appeal to a large number of people. And they have been overrun with marijuana entrepreneurs, which they have nicknamed ganjapreneurs. And many of them call me and ask me, Sheriff, is the red carpet out yet for us to come into your county and make money on marijuana? There are multiple things at work here, and I'm glad that this board is considering each of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. This time, are there any other comments, public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. I know it's been suggested that we bring back an ordinance. I, for one, won't support an ordinance. I think that what we need to do is we do need to support a moratorium on all cultivation at this time. I think that we got to leave it to our staff and our public safety, because obviously the issue becomes access. Current medical patients and how do they still get access? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But I personally want to see an ordinance in place until we can see the fallout from a November election. Because if this thing, if Prop 64 passes, it's a whole different game, as far as the medicinal and the recreational use. And that way, once we have all the cards before us, then we can determine our own future as far as if we do want to ban it outright. Whether, I know it was said in Monterey County that they did have a moratorium. They had a temporary moratorium. And I think in July their latest action was they passed a cannabis tax ordinance. So they're preparing for large scale commercial cultivation of marijuana. I'm not sure if that's what we want to do. I have no idea. But at the least, I think currently the illegal grows are a significant problem for law enforcement, a significant problem for residents, and we need to try to put an end to that. And I think a moratorium would is a step in the right direction. Supervisor Patel?
Yes, as you could tell, Mr. Chairman, we're not going to solve all the problems with the marijuana issue ever in San Diego County, but we need to be clear that we do have a problem right now. We need to put an ordinance in place, and the ordinance that we have somewhat drafted to this point, Supervisor Barrios and I worked on earlier, and then as of late, Supervisor De La Cruz and myself really splits this into two issues. One is for the personal access if a medical card holder wants to grow up, their own medicine that they're able to. So that is the 12 plants on a parcel issue. Personally, I favor a lower number. I think 6 plants is more than generous in that circumstance, and would like to bring back an ordinance to allow for that. And in order to get Supervisor Munzer's support, I'll go ahead and, in the original ordinance, it stated only indoors, so that person would have to grow it in a greenhouse setting. But in order to get, his support for that, I'll allow it to be grown outdoors as long as it's only 6 plants, not 12. But as far as the commercial growing, we have to be very clear on that. It's cease and desist. And I would like to bring back a moratorium that allows commercial operations grown wherever to cease growing any plant, more than 6 plants if you're holding not holding your card immediately. I know County Council Barbara has talked about in the original ordinance 6 months of some sort of amortization. I think that's too long. It's too generous. It was taken in consideration that we need to consider that operation if it's in compliance with any sort of state law. We're past that point. We need to expect that those operations close. It is harvest season. Great time for this ordinance. Great time to stop growing it, and don't replant it until the moratorium has worked its period of time out. Regardless what happens in November with Prop 65, you said, Mr. Chairman? 64. If it becomes legal for recreation or not, it will still need to be regulated as far as commercial growing. You cannot grow it on a 5-acre parcel. I'm sorry, it's just not going to work. It's be regulated by like any other industry and land use in San Diego County, and it's a take into account people's enjoyment of their property and limitations and constraints that such an industry has in an area, and we have to work through that. So I think there's still a lot of work for Supervisor De La Cruz and myself and the committee to look for possibly some conditions that would allow commercial growing. But I just don't see that as being, it's not to be grown like other crops. It's an industry that is separate on its own self. So we need setbacks, land zoning, conditions, that protect the county and its communities. So I think we still need to discuss the number of plants and also the grace period in which these large-scale operations should be shut down, and a moratorium in place.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too will support a moratorium with conditions. The first one, I have a concern. County Council, I need your assistance on this one. I feel that there might be a taking issues involved here if we were to move forward with a moratorium. I do believe that some type of amortization will probably be a best way, and also have the moratorium have a time frame, which allowed many things to occur. One is wait for Prop 64 to see what happened. Two, it'll direct staff and the subcommittee, knowing that there's a time frame in place that they have to come back to the board with regulations, and then three, having something in place at the same time with the moratoriums in place for those who are in existence, and allow them to work with us on how to best develop policy. Otherwise, if we were to do a moratorium right now, there might be a taking issues involved, a legality taking issues. Those who are doing it illegally will continue to do it illegally, and then if Prop 64 passes, what are we going to do then?
Yeah, so there's a number of legal issues. Supervisor De La Cruz has highlighted some of them. What I think we would do is we would get the direction from the board today as how the collective board, no pun intended, wants to go forward, and then at the next meeting we would probably come back first in closed session to advise the board of the legal issues raised by whatever moratorium or urgency ordinance or whatever it is that the board instructs us to do before we went into open session to discuss the matter and adopt whatever ordinance or moratorium we are, because there are some significant legal issues that the moratorium raises, that the urgency ordinance raises, and we want to make sure that the board is aware of them before they pass the ordinance. So I think that's how we would handle that issue. I don't really want to have a discussion in open session about the legal liability that the county is exposed to by adopting a moratorium.
Well, Mr. Chair, could I borrow a little bit more of the time? County Council, can we do something today? We take a snapshot of the county and say, this is it. This is all what's in question. This is all what, in terms of a takings of an issue, if there's an issue of a takings. In other words, we don't want another person growing a grower out there tomorrow. Does the board have the ability to do something like that?
Well, basically, the bottom line is that growing that occurs prior to the adoption of the moratorium or the moratorium going legally into effect would have an argument about being grandfathered in, or the amortization as the takings issues, as you said. Any growing that occurred after the moratorium took effect wouldn't have that argument. So it's no different than any other adult bookstores or any other business that's home building that's under a moratorium. The takings issue is always present and always needs to be addressed properly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I would like to make a motion at this time, Mr. Chair, if I could. I would like to make a motion that we bring back the original ordinance. At that time, we brought it back as an urgency item. It's no longer urgent because it's so much time has passed. But we've all had an opportunity to see what's going on in the state and where this county may be going. I thought it was very clean. It allowed for an amortization. It protected the co-ops that are out there. We can just tweak it to minimize the plants and perhaps include outdoor growing. That would be an easy thing to do. But so my motion would be to bring that back, review it, tweak it to meet the needs of, or the changes that we may need to make. And that's my motion.
Second.
Under discussion in reference to the motion, Mr. Chair? I think we could only direct staff, not make a motion, correct, right?
Right, it's to provide direction to staff in which way we want to go, but you can do it in the form of a motion. So
Got it.
Yeah, and if I may, I believe that ordinance deals with all the issues that we're trying to tackle right now, and we could probably have an amendment that to review it in 2 years to lift or review the commercial component of it. As if we have in place the criteria in which we would allow limited commercial growing in the county at some point in the future with the proper conditions and then we could deal with it. But we can't do it right now.
So I can't recall what was in the ordinance. I'm not sure what kind of regulations are set in place, but at this time, I won't support that ordinance. I just want a flat moratorium on all cultivation in this county, and then we can move forward there. And it'll be, in my opinion, it's a blank slate. I could be wrong, but I don't know what was in that ordinance. I didn't support it the first time, and I don't think I'll support it again. I don't want to establish any kind of local regulations until we have thoroughly vetted through all the issues. So. That's my position.
Yeah, may I make a recommendation then, Mr. Chair? Is that we bring back the original ordinance so that we can look at it and see and review it again, have the opportunity to do that, but also have the opportunity at the same time to choose to go with a moratorium if we don't feel that the ordinance is, so I'll amend my motion to bring the ordinance back with also consideration for a moratorium, so we can weigh both, because it appears to me that a moratorium could have some worse legal effects on the county than an ordinance. And so maybe in closed session, we'll have those legal ramifications, but bring that opportunity for the board in open session.
Right. I'll go ahead and second that.
Accept that amendment.
Right, as amended.
Supervisor Mother?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question of the maker of the motion. So you are in support of looking at growing the plants indoor or outdoor?
Correct.
The amount of plants will be no more than 12, could be less.
It could be less.
There will be a buffer zone placed around any school for outdoor
That's
growing.
in the original ordinance.
And because I do have the ordinance in front of me, it talked about, with this one, when it was only indoors, that the windows shall have adequate covering to prevent marijuana plants from being visible from any location not part of the premise, including the public right-of-way and or neighboring properties. So the outdoor growing should be blocked by an appropriate fence.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
What is S&T?
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Just for clarity, Supervisor Barrios, your motion is to bring back the original ordinance for consideration with changes as discussed by the board,
Correct.
including a sunset review of cultivation regulations and possible consideration of a moratorium, as well as changes discussed by the board today?
Yes.
So basically, we'll be doing the same thing we did today, but bring back the ordinance so we can all look at it.
Right, I just want to make sure I have a motion. Correct. Thank you.
But we'll have a discussion.
We'll have a greater discussion of this.
This will be before us, either by October 11th meeting or before?
Probably next meeting, right?
September 27th is the direction I'm hearing from the board.
Okay,
I think staff can do it, right?
I just want to make sure it doesn't drag on.
It's already drafted.
It's already dragged on, but
It doesn't drag on anymore.
So,
It's been quite a drag.
Mr. Chair, I got a quick question. You know that, the weather question. So if on the 27th, the board decides to move forward with the moratorium, is there anything like we have to wait 30 days to it to occur, anything like that?
So the moratorium is effective only for 45 days.
Okay.
And then at the end, by the 45th day, the board then has to revisit it to determine whether it wants to extend the moratorium or not. And the longest that the moratorium can be extended is up to 2 years.
Okay, so
if the board can make the findings.
Okay, and then at that time we'll know what the November election
I think
will
that,
occur.
an option we need is if we can't come to a determination by next week, we have to have some kind of moratorium for the purposes of law enforcement, in my opinion. On cultivation, you have all these illegal grows popping up. We need to set some kind of standard to prohibit that kind of illegal activity.
Well,
we've got to do something.
The ordinance could address that as well.
Right.
So.
Right. So what I envision is we'll bring back actually 2 ordinances. One will be the previous ordinance that we introduced, that the board discussed with the updated changes that we discussed today. And the second one will be a moratorium ordinance. And then we'll have another discussion, a greater discussion. The board can pick and choose which one it wants. One thing I think we would like direction on that has constantly plagued us and kind of stymied staff from drafting it is how many plants does the board want to allow?
We said 6, I believe.
I heard 12 from Supervisor Munzer. I've heard 6 from Supervisor Botello, 6 from Supervisor Barrios.
You didn't ask me for my opinion.
I haven't heard anything from Supervisor Dela Cruz, and apparently Supervisor Reeves wants 0. So,
moratorium.
So we're a little bit split.
I'm fine with 6.
Oh, so it's 6.
Okay, so we got a majority, 6.
Got a
Okay.
majority, yeah.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, and I think, Lou, you may have mentioned it, is that we do have a sunset that Supervisor Botello mentioned, so that it gives us an opportunity after the law, the state changes or whatever, if we want to revisit it. It's open.
Yes.
Which we always have the opportunity as a board to do anyway, but
Right.
it just gives, maybe it'll give more support to it knowing that we are going to revisit it.
Right. So part of your motion, Supervisor Barrios, was including a sunset date for review of cultivation regulations and a possible moratorium.
Okay.
So part of that would be probably part of the second ordinance that council discussed as part of the motion.
Mr. Chair, whatever the decision happens and the vote is, I'm going to support it 100% with my fellow supervisors. But just as a side note that, the most likelihood what's going to happen is that we're going to have no legit grow operations coming in San Benito County, and all we're going to have is just illegal operations out there.
We're going to have those anyway.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what we do.
Okay.
Okay. So with that being said, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I'm going to support it because, essentially what we're doing is just going to be reviewing the ordinance and whatnot. So I'll support it. So 4-1 passes. At this time, we'll break for lunch.
What time are we coming back, Mr.
Back at 1:30.